Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre. We're once again recording at Nutmeg with our engineer Frank Verderosa. Our guest this week is a popular, versatile, and very busy actor and director who started his career as a child star in the early 1960s and never looked back, with dozens of film and television credits to his name. You've seen him in popular TV shows like Bonanza, My Three Sons, The Virginian, Night Gallery, Kung Fu, Room 222, The Quest, Entourage, Madam Secretary, and The West Wing, and heard him as a voice actor in two iconic Hanna-Barbera series, Space Ghost and Johnny Quest. He's also directed episodes of dozens of notable series, including Heart of Dixie, Criminal Minds, Suits, Psych, Person of Interest, and Burn Notice, among others. He's also done outstanding work as an actor on the big screen in memorable movies such as Divorce American Style, Yours, Mine, and Ours, Magnum Force, 1941, A Little Sex, To Be or Not to Be, Fletch, Van Wilder, Black Sheep, A Very Brady Sequel, and of course as Rush Chairman and future
gynecologist.
And of course as Rush Chairman and future gynecologist Eric Stratton in one of the best and funniest comedies ever made, National Lampoon's Animal House. In a long and productive career, he's worked with Bob Hope, Henry Fonda, Lucille Ball, Jackie Gleason, Steven Spielberg, Mel Brooks, Clint Eastwood, Don Knotts, and Tim Conway, and former podcast guests Chevy Chase and Dick Van Dyke. Hell, he even worked with Mel Blanc, Joe Flynn, and Professor Irwin Corey. It's our pleasure to welcome to the show one of our favorite performers and a man who valiantly tried to rescue the National Lampoon. He's damn glad to meet ya, Tim Matheson.
Hi, Gilbert. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Tim.
Hey, hello.
You'd think he'd know the word gynecologist. Of all the words for you not to know.
That's for sure. He can do it, he just can't say it.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of those words that's in about 50 of the jokes I tell on stage. And yet I fuck it up. Now, Tim, we first met because I used to write for Lampoon, and we first met over there.
That's what it was. I was raking my mind, trying to figure out what it was, and we wanted you guys to come out to Hollywood. We wanted to revitalize the Lampoon, put a bunch of money into it, get into TV and movies again, because it had fallen on harder times. And God, those were the golden years when you were there. Man, that's great.
Yeah, that was fun. That's where I became friends with Drew.
That's right.
Drew Dotsfried.
You did photo funnies. You did those old Fumetti things that they used to do, that Doug Kenny used to do.
At first, I would do articles, and then I realized the photo funnies is much less work, and you get photographed with naked girls all day.
There's boobs. You had to have boobs in it. It was where they got the boobs in the National Lampoon.
Right.
Yeah, it was
What separated it from Mad.
Oh my God, yeah. It was and it broke my heart that we couldn't turn it around, that we weren't able to do it. It was back in that time in the 80s when everybody was raising, through Mike Milken, they were putting together, $100 million here and $50 million there, and all we needed was $5 million, and couldn't get it.
Wow.
And couldn't, and unfortunately, we had to merge with a company that really didn't have its best interests at heart, and otherwise they were going to go broke anyway.
Was that J2 Communications?
Yeah.
That's another scary story. Nobody got paid. I remember working there, freelancing there, and one day there was a padlock on the door.
Oh yeah,
and they were down on Spring Street.
And that's right.
Yeah.
He was a bad guy.
Yeah, the guy behind Dorf.
I just realized something.
I was it.
The guy behind the door.
He's one of those guys that if it was only his ideas were any good, and he just was. Yeah, he was a bad guy.
Yeah, because before then there was the Simmons brothers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then
they're good guys.
So you bought the company or what?
We did a takeover. We bought the stock. We paid Matty off, and we trimmed back all the fat. There were a lot of Simmons working in the Lampoon, and we wanted to. And the Lampoon the magazine was losing money every month, and so we wanted to shrink that deficit every month and then restaff it and get, like yourself, young, talented, funny people who know how to do that and be funny and get it back to its prime where it was doing the radio show, where it was doing Lemmings, where it was doing, Broadway show, off-Broadway shows, where it was, where we would get into podcasts, and go back in and get into movie deals. But basically what had happened was they had just been licensing the name for the Lampoon,
right,
for whatever money came in.
And I remember for a while there, it seemed like there were about 1,000 different times I'd be watching TV at 3 a.m. and you'd see some movie and you go, what the fuck is this? And it would always be National Lampoon Presents
Loaded Weapon.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a series.
That was one of the
was one of the better ones.
Yeah, that was well
there were so many I forgot. Yeah, it's interesting, Tim. I heard you say that you wound up spending a lot of time with people that's the reason you became an actor, was to avoid people like that.
Yes. I mean, there was one point where we would go pitch, all the big firms that would pay for, like Smith Barney and all the big firms that were investing like that. And then we went from one of those meetings right into a mob meeting with a bunch of, they didn't say they were mobsters, but it was a bunch of guys, and literally wanted us to sign a contract before we walked out of the room.
Wow.
And they said, yeah, we'll do this deal. Well, it's a great deal. We're going to do this deal. And it was like, yeah, but we got to talk to the board of directors. We can't just sign. Yeah, you could sign. Just sign it now. No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get out of there. But it was like the Lampoon was in desperate straits at that time, and we were dealing with Michael Milken, and he almost did the deal until the federal prosecutors got a hold of him.
You're to be admired for trying to return it to its glory days. Those were great days.
I loved it. And Gil, you should talk about what your experience was like there, because it was just. That was, what Doug Kenny did and you guys were doing. That was the fun thing. I mean,
Yeah,
Henry Beard and Doug and everybody.
And I remember once I finally got into the scam of writing the photo funnies, rather than actually putting some thought into an article, I found myself writing the same photo funny like 10 times in a row, with a slight variation.
Bigger tits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In one, they were women from outer space, then women from another galaxy.
There was such great material. John Hughes used to write for him.
Of course.
And
everybody. Brian
McConaughey
and McKinney.
Yep.
And Ray, yeah.
Yep. And
Chris Miller.
And Chris and God, it was Legion.
Sean Kelly, Henry Beard, all
Sean
of them.
Kelly and Henry.
Another great guy.
But then when we got there, we found out that what had happened to them, that they couldn't afford those guys anymore, so they would license them to write a story, but they'd only license it for one episode. They didn't own anything anymore. So once you got into the library, there was no library except for the old Doug Kenny era.
Right.
Right. They didn't own anything. So all the stuff, because like Uncle Buck was a story that had been written by John Hughes.
That's right.
For the Lampoon. But you know what? I mean, that's the kind of stuff we wanted to make movies out of, and work with guys like Hughes.
Right. Let's go way back, because before we turned the mics on, we were talking about some of the wonderful character actors you worked with back in the day. It's fair to say you had an entire Western period of your career.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a kid actor, not a kid star. Fortunately, I think I was like the third kid through the door. It was like here would come the lead guy, and then his pal, and then me. I had a couple of lines going. Yeah, let's do that. And so. And I got my training that way, and I worked, and then I started doing voice work. And as Gilbert knows, I mean that's a period where I really learned about the craft of acting. Because I got to tell you, those are the best, some of the best actors I've ever worked with. Mel Blanc was exceptional. He was one of the most amazing. He could do a scene by himself with two characters.
Amazing.
It's like, I mean, you've seen it, Gilbert. I mean, you do that. It's like those are the most amazing people.
Yeah, Mel Blanc to me was he would have been the ideal guest on this show.
Like an otherworldly talent.
Yeah.
And Messick, too. Don Messick.
Oh, and Don Messick. Yeah, I mean, who lived up in Santa Barbara and was, he'd do the dog. He would do the characters. He'd just do anything and everything. And he would do the dog differently than any other dog he'd done. And give it a personality.
And if you're out there and you're shameful enough not to know Mel Blanc, he was the voice of every Warner Brothers cartoon.
Yeah.
Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Yosemite Sam,
Barney Rubble.
And a million
other characters. Yeah.
Well, when I was doing Johnny Quest, which is the first voiceover stuff I did, I was 15 and 16. I was in high school, so I still had to go to school on the set. So when I would go do an episode of Johnny Quest, I had to go 3 hours early or 4 hours early, do my schoolwork for 3 hours, have an hour lunch, and then go and record. So I'm hanging out at Hanna-Barbera while I'm doing my schoolwork, which I could do in probably 20 minutes.
How cool.
And I'd wander around and talk to the animators and see all this, the cells they were doing, because they did it right there. And I could go watch Alan Reed and June Foray and all these.
Janet Waldo.
All these incredible classic artists that did this voice work. And, I mean, it was exceptional. It was just exceptional.
You call them the pros from Dover, I saw in an interview. They really were. They could do anything.
And what were they like in person, these people?
They were, they were lovely and very nice. And and rich, because what would happen was they would do this, they'd do an episode of the Flintstones, and then they'd get in their car and they'd go do 5 more, different recording sessions during the day. And I remember a guy named Marvin Miller who did Millionaire. Right?
Yeah, sure.
He had a huge voiceover. He came in one of the most expensive cars I ever saw in my life was the Gullwing Mercedes. It was like brand new, and I was like, oh my God. This guy's just, they print the money, and Mel Blanc certainly was.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, people don't realize, you'll hear Michael Douglas and people like that doing voiceovers. But these people who you don't know their names, but they do the voice of everything, and I would see them. They would come in, do the voice, and run. Their car would be running downstairs.
A guy like Frank Welker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it would be like they do 20 jobs in a day.
Yep.
Yeah, that's Billy West money.
They do it from their home now, right?
Yeah.
They do it like an ISDN line, and they build a booth in their home, and they just sit there and record all day.
Yeah, they sit in their underwear with a cup of coffee and don't even have to leave the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
You auditioned at the old building? It was the old Barbera building on Ventura.
Yes, I did.
For Joe and Bill, you auditioned for them personally?
Yeah, and Joe was the guy who ran the show.
Mm-hmm.
He, supervised it. He directed the episodes, and Bill was like the backstage guy. He ran the office. He ran, I guess, the distribution. He did all the business stuff. And Joe was the guy who interacted with the actors. Was a glib, wonderful, and he gave me my opportunity to start getting into the other side of things. He let me, I said, I'm going to write an episode for you. He said, yeah, bring it in. Pitch me a bunch of ideas. If we like any idea, I'll let you write one.
That's great.
And I think I wrote 2 or 3 episodes, and he couldn't have been more gracious and couldn't have been more helpful.
Now, I heard Hannah and Barbara hated each other.
I think toward
that
the
I
end,
don't know. That was Abbott and Costello. I don't know. I never saw any animosity between them, but I never saw, but Bill Hannah was never around. It was always Joe.
Yeah.
And I mean, Bill would be there occasionally, but
Was Doug
mostly Joe.
Wildey present at any of those Johnny Quest sessions?
At the beginning, Doug was there, and he was because he was this incredible illustrator.
Oh, yeah.
He was more in the Marvel mold, in the realistic representation. But I think after a couple of episodes, they decided the network wanted to do what it was going to do, and so Doug sort of took a back seat, I guess.
Do you get a kick watching those today? Can you? I mean, you probably. There's people don't know it's only one season of Johnny Quest.
Yeah. And yes, exactly right. It was the first non-comedic half-hour cartoon show.
26
ever.
episodes.
That I can't think of it. And probably now they have some, but I mean, it's like then it was amazing.
Do you watch them still? Do you ever catch them and hear that great theme song, that Hoyt Curtin theme song, and just get flashbacks?
I've seen clips of it here and there. I haven't really sat down and watched one in a while. And then when they rebooted it for I guess it was a TNT or TBS or something, I actually ran across a couple of pictures I had the other day of me, Joe Barbera, and the new kid that they got to do Johnny.
Right.
And I played some other voice in it. I did a voice.
So cool.
And I myself did 3 movies with Jack Warden and never did a scene with him.
I think Tim did some scenes with him.
Yeah.
I did.
So how was it like to work with him?
Well, he was a real treat. And, the lowest key, kind of the laid-back, kick-back guy. But it was at that point in my life where sometimes I'd get on, in a part. I remember I worked with him in a show called Jigsaw John. I think it was his show.
Yeah, that's right.
A very forgettable episodic series that he did. And I remember coming in to do a scene or a test scene or something to get onto that show. And Jack directed me. I mean, he just said, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you, But it was just not telling me what to do. What is it? Just try this. And then there was one transition I had a hard time making. And he said, don't work it so much. He says, you've had this idea for a long time, and then it just comes out easier. I go, oh, yeah, right. That's
So Jack Warden could have been a director.
Oh, God. Well, he was, yes. I mean, he was so subtle and so wonderful and naturalistic and real. And but the chance to I did this movie called Dreamer with him and Susan Blakely. And in cinema, I think he's the only man to ever on camera have bowled himself to death. His character had a heart attack while bowling.
I watched it yesterday.
There's that distinction that Jack that and his Oscar. So I mean,
I remember hearing a story about Jack Warden where he was doing construction work during the day when he was a struggling actor, and he showed up at an audition for King Lear, and smelly, covered in soot. And I think John Houseman,
yes,
was the guy in charge. And he said, and just what do you see playing in this production? What do you see yourself playing in this production? And Jack Warden said, well, hell, who's playing Lear?
What a body of work when you go and you look at all of that stuff, from 12 Angry Men to all the way to The Verdict Heaven Can Wait.
He worked a bunch of times with Warren Beatty.
Yeah, he's in all kinds of stuff. Yeah, he turns up in Bulworth, I think.
Oh, that's right.
Being there. Yeah.
Yeah, he was wonderful. But, there's almost, it's a forgotten sort of role that there was a huge number of those character actor stars like Jack Warden, Sidney Greenstreet, Melvin Douglas.
Oh yeah,
those guys.
That's a good example.
Ed Begley, Sr., they were these guys that played those huge roles.
Lee J. Cobb.
And Lee J. Cobb, certainly. And there's a few of those around now, but it's not quite the same thing.
Nehemiah Persoff was one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Martin Balsam, and there was a whole slew of New York actors that.
And they were those kind of actors that we love here. The kind of actors that you didn't know their names for the most part, but they could do everything.
Charles Durning's another good example. Another guy you worked with.
Charlie Durning, he was he was great. And a fantastic dancer.
Absolutely.
I
yes,
found
I
out.
heard.
Right? He could do a song and dance too.
Yeah, I heard he was a dance instructor for a while.
Is that right? Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love character actors on this show. We've had Joe Pantoliano, we've had Bruce Dern. We've had a lot of those guys. Ron Liebman and Jessica Walter were here. We worship that craft.
And the guy, the guy from all of the Corman movies.
Oh, we had Dick Miller here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there was a story. I did this movie, To Be or Not to Be, that Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft, Charlie Durning, and Jose Ferrer were in, and a slew of other people, wonderful people. And there was and Mel was always, he wasn't directing it. There was another guy who was directing it, which was crazy because Mel was directing it.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure.
And one day, Anne Bancroft and Charlie Durning were doing a scene, and Mel hadn't been around, and they were rehearsing the scene. And Mel stopped and watched the scene. He goes, "Hey, let me tell you what to do." And it's like, they were in the middle of rehearsing with the director, and Anne Bancroft said, "Hold on, everyone, hold on. What have we got here? We have Mel Brooks trying to direct Oscar winner Charles Durning and Oscar winner Anne Bancroft." And Mel said, all right, do it the way you want to do it.
That's great.
But she was, with that humor and that finesse, was one of the few people who could handle Mel.
Yeah. You're good in that movie. You're very funny in that movie.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was fun. It was a treat.
And what was Mel like to deal with when you were...
The most exuberant, excitable. I mean, and it was back when before this was like the time of the transition to video assist, where they would, and it was a big deal. We had a video assist. We had a video camera. On the camera system came through, and you could record the scene. Well, it would take forever to shoot anything because Mel would shoot a take, and then he'd look at it. And he said, "Let's do another one." He'd change a little bit, and literally it would be like take 14, and it's just, you're exhausted with this scene. And finally, you go, "That's it." Then he'd look at it and he'd go, "All right, print 1, 2, and 14, but we won't use it." So basically, he just wanted to prove he was right about 1 and take 1 and 2. I mean, he was. But he was great. He was. I actually got to sleep with him in a scene. Yes. I slept with Mel Brooks.
Yes.
And video assist, another thing that was what Jerry Lewis invented.
That's right.
And said he wanted to be known for.
Yeah.
Or remembered for.
Is that right?
Supposedly, yeah, among other things.
He was funnier than video assist, I think, right?
I think it's interesting, Tim, that you always knew that you wanted to be an actor from a very early age. You're one of those people, you've said, who was lucky enough to know.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there was no doubt. I mean, it was, I remember the first time I was on, like a play at school or something, and like in the 3rd grade or 4th grade. Or I remember the first laugh I got. I mean, Gil, I bet you do too. I mean, it just, and something happens. You go, I like that. Yeah. I can do that. Right?
What was the laugh?
It was a play about Sacagawea, I mean, it was, and if you can get a laugh in a play about Sacagawea, you got a career in this business, let me tell you.
Didn't you have an empty TV console in your house and you used to crawl inside of it? And
oh, yes. Yeah, that was, gosh, it was back in the day of, oh my God, in the early 50s, we had, you have these huge consoles with this little bitty screen. And then when the TV broke down, they'd haul the whole guts out of it and take it away for a week or so and work on it. And so I would get inside this huge console because they took the back off, so I could sneak in and get in there and stick my head in the screen and play what then was probably Stan Freberg's Beanie and Cecil or some silly stuff, I loved it. And I was not an outgoing guy. There's these kind of actors that are, they do voices, they do like Gil, they you can, and I'm not a great mimic. I can't do voiceover, like the people that we know. And so, but I just like performing. It just made me a shy kid. It gave me freedom to be whatever I wanted to be.
So did you say to your parents, like, I want to be an actor, or how did it come about?
I did. My mom was like, okay, whatever you want. I mean, you want to play baseball? We'll get you in a little league. You want to, and because my mother was a single parent, and she worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. And so it worked out that, I could either take a bus or get a ride. She'd get off work and come and take me to my auditions, which had to be after 4:00 because you were in school until 3, and then usually the auditions were between 4 and 6. So it worked out. And then when I worked, I get a job a day here, a day there, acting. She would drop me off at the studio, find another parent that was working on the set and say, would you watch my kid and tell the teacher that you're responsible for him? And then she'd go off to work. And then when she got done with work at the end of the day, she'd come pick me up.
What a cool mom.
She was great.
To encourage and also facilitate.
Yeah, she was a big champion of mine. And literally every ad, every TV guide that had my name in it, she lacquered and put on a plaque.
Fantastic.
And it was like, it was just the LA Times, the section that shows what's going to be on Channel 5 at 6:00. She plaqued it, and it was like, oh my God.
I saw an interview with you and you said you were doing Leave It to Beaver and you were actually starstruck by Jerry Mathers.
Oh. He was the first young star I think I ever met. And I just, when I was on that show, I thought, wow, now I've arrived. I mean, this is a show that had been on as long as I could remember. And he was a nice kid, Jerry Mathers. He was.
But you're a kid and you're working with these legends. I mean, Fred McMurray and Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda and Jackie Gleason. And, you're not out of your teens.
Yeah, I was lucky to have the opportunity to work with vaudevillians, like Debbie Reynolds and I don't know about Van Dyke, but
Burt Lahr.
Gleason. Burt Lahr.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. I did a pilot with Burt Lahr.
Yes, you did.
And there was something, and Lucy and Henry, I don't think was in vaudeville, but Bob Hope, and they took care of the people that they had worked with in vaudeville or back in the early days of movies that had fallen on harder times, and so they'd have them, Bob Hope would have them, or Gleason would have them around as stand-ins, or they'd get a one day here, a line there, and but they were tough. Lucy was tough. She, whether you were 3 or 83, your lines, you show up and you do your job, and there's no goofing around, no BS, and she taught me how to prepare. Henry was the same way. Henry was really cool and relaxed. Lucy was, she was worrying about the budget. So, she was more concerned about everything. And Henry was like, okay, Lucy, it's going to be fine. Come on now, Lucy. It'll be all right. We'll do it.
She was a taskmaster, huh?
She was. She definitely was. But there was times I remember she invited me into her trailer and sat and talked to me about what I wanted to do and how, what it took to be a star. You want to be a star, you got to act like a star. And whatever that meant, I don't know. But she was, she could sort of let down her guard and be, as personal as she could. But she was, she was the first female executive in Hollywood. She owned a huge studio, Desi Lou, with Desi, and she ran it. She ran her other show. They owned Desilu Gower, Cahuenga, and Culver City Studio. They were huge studios that they ultimately sold. And when we started Yours, Mine, and Ours, I think she just closed the deal, sold out Desilu for like, I don't know, 20-some-odd million dollars, which was probably like $1 billion today.
I got to bring up some of these other actors, too, and now you got me thinking how many of them were in vaudeville. I mean, Joe Flynn, we mentioned. Van Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Is in Yours, Mine, and Ours, and I think he's in Divorce American Style.
Yes, he is, yeah.
Lee Grant, who we had on this show, who's wonderful.
I just met her. She's a doll.
Oh, you just met her at Chiller.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And she's in love with me.
She loves Gilbert.
Well, what's not to love?
Tom Bosley, Jason Robards.
Yeah.
Dick Van Dyke is obviously in Divorce American Style. Shelley Berman. I mean, you're working with all of these people. You're not at
Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen. You did Bracken's World.
Yeah,
right.
And I did also. He was in How to Commit Marriage. The Hope
that's
movie,
right.
And he was also in the first episode I did of The Virginian.
That's right.
And a great role model, you know. And he was the kind of guy who would sit there and say, "Don't worry so much about acting. Read the paper in the morning when you get on the set. Read the paper. Find out what's going on in the world. You know, have other interests. Don't just get all sucked up in
interesting.
in acting." Yeah, he
had perspective.
That, and he had a little a fart sound.
Oh yeah,
he was obsessed with that.
Yes,
thing.
you worked with him, didn't you?
I remember I once met him at some event. And, of course, he had that fart maker with him.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, I had one of those that didn't work well. And he told me, he said, okay, well, what type do you have? Is it the one with the black rubber and the hard red metal? And I said, yeah, I think that's it. And he goes, oh, that's useless. Throw it away. What you want to get is the tan. He knew exactly
That's hilarious.
what fart maker to get.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And he was obsessed. You couldn't carry on with you. You'd be in a room and that you'd hear this, and I was in on the joke, but he would do it when people who weren't in on the joke were standing around, and it was just like.
Tim, do you look back at these people sometimes and say, wow, I mean, at 13 or 14, I really didn't quite have the perspective to know that this is Henry Fonda, this is Lucille Ball, this is, Jason Robards. You work with Richard Widmark and Burl Ives and Brian Keith and all of these people.
I kind of knew.
You kind of knew even then.
On a good day. I mean, it was like some of them I knew, and I knew enough to pay attention.
Uh-huh.
I remember Henry, I mean, especially like with Henry, there was a scene, because I was just beginning to study acting, and there was a scene the first day of Yours, Mine, and Ours. And Henry's supposed to get up, he's at his house with all his kids, and he gets up and he's leaving the house. He goes to the front door and he stops at the front door and he turns around and he has this huge speech, I don't know, three-quarters of a page. And I was looking at the script and I was thinking, as an actor, how would I do this? I wouldn't know. I don't know what's he going to say? Because Lucy had written her part and they had written her part for her. And this really hadn't been tailored for Henry, I don't think, at that point,
Interesting.
And Henry gets up, we go to roll the film, and then we get, first take, and Henry stands up, does the scene, walks up to the door, turns around, and he's so relaxed and so natural, and he's Henry Fonda. And he just had all those inflections and all those beats, and he was just so rich and so full. And I just looked at him, I said, God, that's a movie star. And I believed every word he said, and I just realized, I mean, you just, by osmosis, you get, wow, I want to do that. That's what it is. I don't know how he does it, but that's what you got to get to be who Henry Fonda is. So it's an example that you got to really, through your studies, got to figure out, oh, I know how to get there. You just got to make it real for yourself. And it was a real sort of, it was a schooling, by just to work with those people, like with Debbie and Dick Van Dyke.
Jason Robards.
And Robards.
Yeah.
You had like the greatest teachers in the world through your career.
Yeah, I mean, and I was a kid, so it's like, the sort of that career that not a lot of people get. Usually you're starting when you're 20s, you're late teens or something. But here I was at a very youthful age. My favorite story was when I was doing this horrible movie with Bob Hope and Jackie Gleason. Only terrible script. I mean, but it was fun to do. But I was Jackie's son, and I'm marrying this hippie girl, and we're in a band, So they had a real band playing the band, and they had this young actress who'd never acted before. And so when we rehearsed a scene, it was like you didn't know what they were going to do, and they weren't very good at it. And Jackie looked at me one day and sort of just whispered, he says, "Kid, you and I are the only ones here and know what we're doing. Let's just get this show on the road."
That's cool.
And I was like, "Yeah, Jackie, you got it."
I've never seen How to Commit Marriage. Is that the one where Bob Hope plays golf with a chimp?
Yes, and that was and it was the first inkling that this is going to be a stinker. I get the pink pages, and it was like, it was not a bad movie before that. And I got the pages, and they cut all this crap out, and then they put in this golf game with a chimpanzee, and I said, "Oh God, we're in trouble."
Once they throw in a chimp, it means there's no more ideas left.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the one Professor Irwin Corey turns up in.
That's right.
How to Commit Marriage.
That's right.
Yeah. And Tina Louise.
And Jane Wyman.
And Jane Wyman, that's right.
Yes. The former wife of the President Reagan.
Absolutely.
There was one, this is out of school, but so one day there's Gleason and Hope are sitting at a table, and they're running all these pretty girls by, dancers, and all these young ladies are coming in, and it's like an audition. And I was like, wow, what part are they auditioning? There's no parts for any young ladies like that. Whatever, maybe they written a scene or something. And I think they were auditioning for. Then after this audition thing went down, a couple of the girls were standing by there, and they went, "Okay, that's lunch." And we all went to lunch. And I think that it was a casting session for some extracurricular activity that took place during lunch.
For Hope or Gleason?
I think both.
Unreal.
See, back then, there was no such a thing as sexual harassment.
Are you sure about that?
Well, it existed, but there wasn't a word for it. Yeah.
No.
And it was just like business as usual.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit shameful, but it was like and it took me like probably I didn't realize it till probably 4 or 5 days later. I went, "Oh, that's what that was." Yeah, I was real quick.
And there was another actor you worked with who was in To Kill a Mockingbird and The Pawnbroker, Brock Peters.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that Night Gallery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was under contract to Universal. I was one of the last sort of contract actors that back in the day, and it was like 1966 or 7. I was in the Virginian, and they put me under what they called long-term term contract. And so I did the Virginian for a year. Then it changed to The Men from Shiloh, and my character went away. But they had written a pilot for me to star in, and so it was a 2-hour movie, and then I got another whole year under contract, and so I did every show at Universal. And I'd have to still audition, but because they were paying me, I'd go in and audition. By God, I got every one I auditioned for. It was amazing. Imagine that. I kept thinking, wow, I'm really good, aren't I? And one of those was Night Gallery, and it was a treat because I had, at an early age, one of the earliest jobs I did, I did a small little part. I think I got cut from a Twilight Zone episode.
Really?
One about a character that had married a younger woman. I think Ruta Lee played that, the younger wife, and he was trying to keep up with her, and she was worried he was too old, and he felt bad about it. So his brother was a scientist and had this potion that he could drink and make him younger. Well, he drank so much of it that in one scene you see him, he's going through the throes of some horrible thing, and then he rushes out of the room, and in the next room he's like 20 years old running there, and then he falls down, and when he gets up, he's 12 years old, and he runs into the other room, and he falls on the bed, and then he's a baby laying there on the bed. I was the 12-year-old, but I think they trimmed it. I don't think they needed that piece, but I got to meet Rod Serling, and
wow.
So Night Gallery was the chance I got to really spend some time with him as sort of like an adult actor, and I could talk to him a bit.
Patrick McNee is in that
That's
Night
right.
Gallery episode too from the Avengers.
I remember that one.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Oh God,
You did so
And
much.
I remember Patrick McNee one time went on TV and presented that episode years later.
Did he?
And he said, had they filmed it now, think of the money they would have saved on makeup for the old man.
Yeah. Night Gallery is one of those shows that you just always wanted to be better. You wanted it to be as good as The Twilight Zone, and it didn't quite live up.
Well, because Rod didn't write it.
He didn't write it. Yeah.
Nah,
He was
he was taking a check. And,
right.
Yeah, I heard it was just, let's slap Rod Serling's name on it, and that's it.
There are some good ones. There's some real moments. Look at I'm just looking at the TV you did then, Tim. The bold ones, Ironside. You did the Smith Family again with your pal Henry Fonda.
And Ronnie Howard.
You went back and worked with Lucy again on Here's Lucy.
Yes.
Night Gallery, Kung Fu, Room 222, Bracken's World. I mean, you're working like crazy. I assume some of those are Universal shows that you were talking about.
Many of them were, but there's a lot of them were freelance, and Universal did that thing where I'd go out and audition for other shows and get them, like the Smith Family or Bracken's World.
Right.
And then they would take the money and just keep paying me my check. So I think they came out ahead on the deal, after.
Police Story, The Magician with Bill Bixby.
That's right.
Medical Center, Hawaii Five-0, Owen Marshall. We remember all of these shows.
Yes, yeah.
And right around this time, and I'm looking at some of these other actors you work with, these great names, Burl Ives, Keenan Wynn, my God, young Nick Nolte.
Yes.
Right around this time, you did Magnum Force?
Yeah. I had been, my first vacation, I went to Europe sort of bumming around with a buddy of mine, and we started in London, went to Paris, and then got to Rome, and I got a call that in a script, because there was the William Morris Agency, was my agency at the time, gave me the script and said, they need you back in LA to audition for this. So, that's great. And so I got on a plane and I worked on this audition for the lead cop, and I was thinking, I really want to be in this movie. And I get there and I go in for my audition, or I think is an audition, and the director says, "How tall are you?" And I said, "I'm 6'2". And he says, "Okay, you got it." And I said, "Well, what do you mean you got it?" He said, "Yeah, you're going to play this guy." And I said, "Well, can I read for that one?" He said, "Nah, it's been cast for months." It was David Soul's part.
David Soul, yeah.
A bigger character part. And he just said, "I just want to make sure you were the right size." And he said, "Now we're not going to start shooting for 6 weeks." And I said, "I came all the way back from Rome. I could have said." It was like, but I got to say, working with Clint was just a trip, because I didn't know if he was the real deal. I just thought, this guy's a TV actor. I was full of myself as an actor, and I thought, God, is he really an actor? And I came up to him the first day of shooting, and I said, "Hi, Clint, how are you?" I said, "I'm Tim, and listen, you want to rehearse? You want to work on the scene? You want to do anything?" And he said, "I'll be happy to do that with you." And he goes, No, I, not really. Don't want to do that. There's something special about the first time you say the words, and I'd like to get that on film."
Wow.
I went, "Okay." And I just walked away, and I thought, all right, he's not much of an actor. He doesn't know how to rehearse. But we rolled the camera. He listens better than almost any other actor I've ever worked with. And then during the scene, it wasn't a big, long scene, but he changed something that affected one of my lines, and I'm listening, and I changed my line to adjust to his line, and then it was just this banter back and forth between us. And he was right that there was something magic and special about the very first time you do it. And that's the way he still works. And I walked away from that day, and also that movie, was just the utmost respect for him, because he really directed it. I think it was one of his early, directing things, even though there was another director of record on it.
Ted Post.
Ted Post, right? Yeah. I don't even remember Ted being around, but he was there. But I mean,
Kind of a Mel Brooks deal.
Yeah.
There was something with Clint Eastwood, too. He'd play like a typical tough guy part, but there was always something in his inflections and in his eyes that you go, wait a minute, am I supposed to be taking this seriously? There was always like that part, like a slyness.
Yes. And you liked him, because if he just played it that tough, you wouldn't like him. And yet at some point, Harry Callahan, you liked the guy, you really, he cared for people.
It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, it's a John Milius wrote it.
Yeah, really good.
It was one of the better ones. Yeah, and Clint couldn't have been nicer and sweeter. And you go home early with him. You never do too many takes. You don't do a lot of different shots. You just do the bare minimum that he knows we need to make this picture. That's all you need. And then we go home.
Right. And you're in the middle of your Western period too at this point. I mean, this is interesting too. You did a TV movie called Hitched with Sally Field. I love these actors: John Fiedler, Denver Pyle, and Slim Pickens. Those are three names. Those are three names that we perk up at.
Wow.
Oh, I know. And I think Ed Begley was in Ed Begley Jr.
Jr.
Oh, that's where I met Ed Begley Jr. in that movie.
We had Ed here a couple of weeks ago. He's the best.
He's so funny. God damn,
and
funny.
you're doing all. You did How the West was one, and then you did The Quest with your buddy Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Another show I remember that took a beating from Charlie's Angels, as I recall.
We were up against that show. We kept thinking, nobody's going to watch that. Who would you rather watch? You want to see the Cowboys or you want to see these girls? And I think maybe the girls. What the heck?
And it's so funny. It's like you're already in millions of movies and TV shows. And yet, if you say to someone, Tim Matheson, I'll go, oh, the guy from Animal House.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we're not one of those shows.
Which is great. I mean, because, that came at a point in my life where after the Westerns, and I did that series with Kurt, and then I was doing and I was just being a journeyman actor, working as much as I could because I was building a house. And I was sick of playing the parts that I was getting. They were just like boring, kind of like nice guy, dramatic parts on these episodic shows. So I joined a group out here called the Groundlings and started doing improv. And that was the thing that got me into Animal House, because they wouldn't let me audition because they'd seen all my TV stuff. And they said, no, he's a cowboy or a surfer.
Right,
He's not for us. And I asked a favor of one of the executives to just let me go in and fall on my face. Then I can walk away from it. But just let me get it. Let me just have a shot at it. So they let me come in with my long hair and everything. And I got to audition with Peter Riegert, who played Boone in the movie. And it was a great audition. It was one of those that just took off. And it was when we were improvising, and and they were just in tears, and it worked out really well.
Did Landis follow you out in the hallway? Do I have that story right?
Yes. Yeah. On my second audition, they called me back and had me, come in, and it turned out just as well as the first one. And he said, would you wait out in the hall? John Landis says, he's so animated. He says, could you just stand out in the hall for a second? Wait in the hall. And then you'd hear all this commotion going on inside, and laughing and commotion and carrying on. And then he comes out and he goes, you are fantastic. You're going to get this part. We're going to hire you. He said, but don't tell a soul that I said that. Don't tell a soul. You swear? And I said, yes, I swear. I ran out. I got a dime out. I put in a phone. I called my agent. I said, I got the fucking part.
That's fantastic.
But don't tell anyone.
That's fantastic.
And what was your experience like working with Belushi?
Well, John Belushi was just the most generous, warm-hearted, big-hearted, sweet guy that, generous and talented physical comedian, and one of the most special people I'd ever met. And because, there was all that sort of conflict between East Coast actors and West Coast actors, and the East Coast, we're more serious and we're more dedicated, and we're here for the theater and the art, And you're some pretty people that out there just trying to make money on TV and don't really know your craft. But Belushi wasn't buying any of that shit. He was a huge star on Saturday Night Live already, and couldn't have been more gracious and more generous. And maybe it's the fact that I made him pay me back $100 I loaned him one day. He'd do this thing to you where you go, hey, give me $100. Hey, we got any money? Give me $100. Give me $100. and then you'd never hear about it again. I said, so and nobody would ever ask him for it. But I was so cheap, I gave him $100. Is he going to pay me back, right? And he goes, yeah, I'll pay you back. And so, like days go by. We're in rehearsal and stuff. And I said, John, where's my $100? Where's my $100? He said, yeah, I'll get it back to you. And finally I said, John, I want the $100. And he said, all right. He probably looked at somebody else and said, give me $100. Here, Tim, here's your money. So I think that maybe was some reason that he just, I earned some respect from him because I got my $100.
Interesting. Was Chevy supposed to play Otter?
Oh, yeah. It was written for Chevy. And D-Day was written for Danny Aykroyd.
Wow.
And Harold Ramis, I think, wrote Boone for himself.
Interesting.
But Landis wanted just Belushi. He didn't want to do a Lampoon radio show, or he didn't want to do Saturday Night Live where there's a bunch of comics running around. He wanted to surround John Belushi with real actors and keep him grounded and keep the whole movie grounded and not have it sort of wink and a nod, which is what happened with Caddyshack. And not that that's a brilliant movie, but Caddyshack, it got away from the story. I think it was the Michael O'Keefe character was supposed to be a movie about this kid Caddy, right? But it turned into a movie about Chevy and Billy and Bill Murray and
Rodney.
Rodney, so and as you should.
Right.
I mean, there's a book that just came out about it. I think about the making of and how they just went with it. I mean, and Harold was great as a director. He just said, "I'm going with this. This is funny."
Yeah. What was Kenny? What was your experience with the Stork, with the great Doug Kenny, who co-founded the National Lampoon?
He was the smartest, funniest man I think I've ever met.
Really?
And
more than Gilbert?
Right, on par with Gilbert. I haven't spent that much time with Gilbert. But he was so subtle about it. He wasn't. Whereas because I hung out with Chevy and Doug right around the time that Caddyshack came out, right before Doug died, and Doug would say the funniest thing you've ever heard, the most impromptu, educated, erudite comedy line you'd ever heard, and then Chevy would step on it and not let him get a laugh, and it would and make a fart joke, and Doug would just look at you and go, that's Chevy. What do you? But he was. I remember he looked at me one day and just said, "No more free brunch." A takeoff on there's no free lunch line. And it's like he would just do those things that they were so smart. I mean, he was the heart and soul of the Lampoon.
He sure was.
And I think that he was tortured. He was obviously very tortured. And he'd had so much success and so much money so early that by the time he got to Eugene, Oregon, when we were shooting Animal House, you could see that he was delicate. He was on a delicate balance. And then once that hit as big as it hit, his first movie becomes the most successful comedy of all times. And then he was, then he was off to the races. I mean, just, you couldn't stop him. And then when he did Caddyshack and it wasn't as successful as Animal House the first weekend.
How could it follow? How could anything follow?
And I said, Doug, I said, Animal House a home run. This is a double or a triple. I said, well, how bad can it be? I mean, they can't all be home runs. And a week later, he was dead.
Hard on himself.
And he jumped off a mountain in Hawaii.
Or fell.
Yeah. I think Harold Ramis had the classic line about Doug Kenny. He said, I think Doug slipped and fell off the hill while looking for a place to jump.
That's a great line. It's a great line. You know what?
Yeah.
Gallows humor to the end.
Yeah.
And then his funeral service somehow inspired the movie The Big Chill, which was also a very weird turn of events. Yeah, the producer is a guy named Michael Schamberg, who was there and thought to make a movie about this young genius who didn't live up to his potential.
Yeah.
The Costner character that you don't actually see in the movie.
That's
there's
right.
Such chemistry among those actors. And I mean, I assume you credit Landis and Ivan Reitman for assembling everybody, but it's as if you guys are acting together your whole lives. I mean, it's almost like you're watching an established comedy team, especially you and Riegert.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess those things just happen. They exist in a state of bliss, but that really clicked.
There was, I think a lot of credit. The script was the most brilliant, well-written, well-crafted script I'd ever seen. And we didn't do a lot of improvisation. And Landis brought us up the Deltas 5 days early, and we basically rehearsed. But there were no rehearsals because Landis didn't know anything about all that stuff. But we just hung out and spent all day together every day, and we're getting in the spirit of it. And I remember when we did there was two scenes where Peter and I were in. I think the scene where Belushi was saying, "What happened to the Germans when they bombed Pearl Harbor?"
Oh yeah, the rallying cry speech. Right,
that sequence, and it was and there was another scene with the toga party scene where I gave Peter a line. I said, "Look." It was Otter's line. He says, you know what we have to do? Toga party. And that was Otter's line. And I said to Peter, I said, look, we're so tight. Why don't we say it? We look at each other and say it together at the same time. And I pitched that to Landis. He said, yeah, try it. And so it just made more sense to me that we were, and it was little things like that bonded us, because Peter and I bonded anyway. And we were all very much, in character and in sync. And plus, we got into a huge fight with a fraternity up in Oregon.
Oh, really?
Together the weekend before we started shooting. So we got our ass kicked by these football players that
I know that
for invading their party, their rush party. So they said, "You can't be in here. Only fraternity members could be in here." And I said, "Well, all right, we'll leave. I'm sorry, big deal. All right, we're leaving." But they were all drunk, and then they jumped us out in the lawn, and we ran into the night laughing.
I have to blow a little smoke up your butt, Tim, because as much as I love Chevy, I think that the character would have been a little too wink with Chevy playing, and I assume it would be kind of a cousin of Ty Webb in Caddyshack. Chevy's character, and your version of Eric he's a cad and an operator. But there's a little innocence to him. There's a little, you know what I'm trying to say? There's a sweetness to him.
Yeah. I mean,
that I'm not sure Chevy would have brought out.
No, that's very nice of you. Thank you. I think that was what Landis wanted to get at. I mean, because he said basically, to all of us, they have to like you. They have to like you. You can't do mean things. I mean, there was a line in the script, as I recall, where we're on our way to the Emily Dickinson School for Girls. Where we're driving.
Von Leibowitz.
We're driving in this cat. I mean, there's this Continental that Flounder's brother has loaned him for the weekend. So, and Flounder's going, "Oh boy, is this great! I hope we get dates." And the line was that, and I said, "Yeah," and Flounder goes, "I hope she has big tits." And I think then Otter looked around and said, "Yeah, at least as big as yours." And that was the written line. And then Landis, I think we did a take of that. And he goes, no, it's not nice. You can't be mean to him. So he was always protecting the characters from being mean-spirited and saying things that you wouldn't like. And that's why the girls walked home, that scene where the women walk home from the Dexter Lake Club, where it was the black club, which was so politically incorrect. It's very funny, which was perfect lampoon. That's why the scene is there where they're walking home, so that they got home okay. They all weren't raped and murdered and left by the side of the road, so that we looked okay. That we ran out and left them there. It was like a bad thing.
You've got to do something. He's serious this time. I think he knows about the exams.
He's right.
You're right. We got to do something.
Absolutely.
You know what we got to do? Toga party.
We're on double secret probation, whatever that is. We can't afford to have a toga party.
You guys up for a toga party?
Toga! Toga!
Yeah, I think they like the idea, Hoove.
Oh, Otter, please don't do this.
I got news for you, pal. They're gonna nail us no matter what we do. So we might as well have a good time. Toga, 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 toga,
I love what you tweeted when Stephen Furst, who passed too young, and a funny guy in his own right. And tell Gilbert what you tweeted as a tribute.
Well, I think I said, hey, Flounder, you fucked up. You trusted us. Right?
It was perfect. It was funny and edgy and sweet at the same time.
Yeah.
I remember him saying in an interview about his weight, and he used to say he would go into McDonald's, and he was so embarrassed by how much he ate that he used to make a list. And he would to make it, and he would make it look like he's ordering for other people. And he'd go in McDonald's and go, okay, Frank wants the fish fillet, and I think Bob wants a large
Poor
Diet
guy.
Coke. And
Poor guy.
God. Yeah. I hated him when he got up there. He was so innocent and so like golly gee, he was so like that. After about 3 days of this, I'd had enough of this. Just shut the fuck up, would you? You're just bugging the shit out of me. And then after 3 or 4 more days, even before we started shooting, I kind of fell in love with the guy. You sort of just that's Steven, and because he had just this way about him, and he told these silly, stupid stories about how, he froze his dog. He blew his dog up in the. No, I froze Fluffy was the story. He froze his dog. He got his dog all wet and dirty, and he knew he was going to get in trouble, so he stuck him in the freezer to try and dry him out or something. I don't know why he put him in the freezer, and then he forgot about him and left him in there.
Oh my God!
oh,
It's a terrible story.
I know.
What I remember is after Animal House came out, there were about 2 or 3 TV shows.
There was one on every network.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
That was trying to be the Animal House
There was
series.
Delta House, I think, was the one that had Steven in it.
Yeah, Steven and D-Day
And then Jamie Widows, maybe?
Widows, and I think Jim Doughton, a bunch of the people.
It was
And-
brothers and
Michelle,
sisters.
Michelle Pfeiffer was
Michelle
in it.
Pfeiffer was on it. Yeah. There was one called Brothers and Sisters,
Oh, okay.
and I can't remember the other one.
But they all had a version of Animal House
Right.
that was on the network.
Right.
Yeah.
But that cast, I mean, Karen Allen and Kevin Bacon and you and Peter and Widows. I mean, it's a great cast, and it's just great to watch everybody. And John Vernon. Tell us about, and there's a guy with a career.
Yes.
You see him in Point Blank with Lee Marvin? You must have.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he was, Landis just fought to get him in the movie. And Cesare De Nova. I mean, here were
Carmine.
these, again, character actors, character stars that had been in, he'd been a heavy villain, in Clint Eastwood movies and Josie Wales, I think. And I mean, he was a very formidable actor. So I think he was the perfect Dean Wormer. But he kept trying to be funny. And Landis would go, no. And he'd come to John and he'd pitch him. John, I'll do this, and then I'll do this and this. And he goes, no, just say the lines. Just, you guys, perfect the way it is. But very nice fella, very, wonderful man. I mean, we were all in our own compartments. I mean, we only had 1 or 2 scenes with Dean Wormer, so I never saw him.
Right.
I mean, he was around the roadway in, but, and I realized it the other day, there's really only one scene where we're all together with the Deltas and the Omegas and Vernon and just everyone is in the courtroom scene.
That's right.
That's the one scene where we all, and really it's Jamie Widows and me, I think, and John Vernon. And, and it was really.
And Marmalade and.
Yeah, and all those people are there. But I mean, it's like we sort of carried the ball, and it was a very special day that when we did that, because when we shot the movie in like 5 weeks, it was like we had no time for anything.
He played a cartoon superhero as you did. You were on Space Ghosts, and he was Iron. You ever see those bad Marvel cartoons from the early 60s where they basically just animated comic strips and tried to make... He was Iron Man.
Who was?
John Vernon.
No way.
He was.
Wow.
He was.
I remember those.
He did those Marvel superheroes cartoons. 65, 64.
They would have a still frame.
That's correct.
Of like Spider-Man, and they would shake it around for the action.
Pretty much
there would be no animation, or they'd zoom in and zoom out on the picture real quick.
Yep. And I think I may have misspeaking here. He might have been Submariner, too. He had a long career. He did a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
And it's funny you talk about the acting style, because we had Ed Begley in here talking about playing comedy, and maybe he was talking about Spinal Tap. I can't remember what it was. And we had David Zucker here from Airplane, but talking about, and Ed was saying you got to play it like it's Strindberg for it to work. And it's interesting that Landis gave him that direction, play it straight. When you watch Animal House today, you realize it's really not trying hard to be funny.
Oh, no.
It's playing it like a drama, and that's why one of the reasons it works.
And
I think
when
so.
Zucker was on, it was like originally they wanted to load Airplane with comedians.
Ugh.
And then what I always felt what hurt Leslie Nielsen was when he realized he was funny. And he was no longer the B actor that he was in Airplane, and he was trying to be funny.
Yes, yes.
Some of that may have been direction. Zucker was here, and I think he's very happy with Stack, and he's very happy with Nielsen, but he says, looking back now, Bridges was a little broad. That Bridges was Lloyd Bridges was going for laughs, and it still bothers him. Like 37 years later.
He's dead. Dig him up. Make him do it again.
The other thing about Animal House, and this I found funny. The guy that played Otis Day, I don't know. I hope this is true and not bullshit. Dwayne Jesse changed his name to Otis Day and toured.
Absolutely.
That's
he
so
makes
cool.
a lot of money.
Isn't that cool?
To this day, especially like this is our 40th anniversary year, and there's a lot of like Chiller and those kind of events. There's a lot of these events, and I actually was at one down in Orlando. No, I take it back. I was in Tampa Bay, and Otis was there, and I always wanted to call him Dwayne, and I said, no, his name. Call him.
He changed his name to the character's name, Gilbert.
And he gets, he plays with a local band, and he sings the songs, and he gets paid a lot of money.
Damn it, everything works in that movie, no matter how many times you see it. And I know this is the thing about art, is that sometimes there are happy accidents. But you go back and you watch that thing, and you think, oh, am I looking at this, through nostalgia, through rose-colored glasses, because I remembered it so fondly. It's just like Blazing Saddles.
Yep.
Or Young Frankenstein. You could just put it on, and it's just textbook.
Well, I agree, and it's a testament, I think, to the script, because Harold Ramis and Chris Miller and Doug Kenny were the smartest guys in the room, and it was just that good. Belushi was really the only one who improvised much. We might throw in a line here. I got an idea. Let me try this. Yeah, go ahead. But mostly was per script. It was written that way and performed that way. And those guys were just geniuses. And Harold had a tremendous career as a director and an actor.
Right, sure.
But better as a director and a writer, and Doug certainly as a writer, and the founder of the Lampoon, and we lost him too soon.
To all of them. We would have killed to have Ramis here. But it's also a turning point for you, because at this point you're saying, I'm not doing comedies, I'm playing Westerns, I'm playing Boy Next Door characters. Now after Animal House, you're the comedy guy.
Yeah,
you're in Up the Creek. You're in 1941 doing a big comedy scene. Suddenly get Matheson if you're doing this comedy.
I mean, Spielberg called me. I don't know how he found me. I was on my way back from, I think, the How the West Was Won or the Apple Dumpling Gang Rise Again, which were two jobs that I took after Animal House, I believe. Not How the West Was Won, but I did. But it must have been Apple Dumpling Gang, because I needed the money. There was no money for Animal House. Nobody got paid anything. I mean, I think I got paid $20,000 for 6 weeks, which was less than my TV money. It was less than I normally made. I said, but for this one, I'll do it. And so I'm on my way back from Utah after shooting this movie with Tim Conway and Don Knotts, and I stop at like the MGM Grand, and I, wake up and the phone's ringing one morning, and it's Spielberg, and he wants me to, he says, why don't you come over to the studio? I want to get to know you. I loved you in the Animal House, and it was like, okay. And when I got there, he said, there's 3 parts in this movie, and you can have any of them you want. But I think you should take this one. But whatever you want to do, and it was like, okay, all right. And I realized that the character I played in it, Loomis Burkhead, was a character that could have been and should have probably been cut out of the movie. And the movie's way too long. I think it's funny, but it's one of those things that easily that whole sequence with me and Nancy Allen, that whole thing could have been cut out of the movie.
Well, yeah, it's not germane to the rest of the plot.
No,
but it doesn't matter. I don't want them to cut it out because it's one of the funniest things in the movie.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it was so much fun to work with him. But it was the real sort of tragic thing was that John Belushi had changed so much, and his success and his stardom had taken such a toll on him from the time we did Animal House till the time we did 1941. I mean, Blues Brothers had been in between, and now they're touring. He and Danny were touring as Blues Brothers, and they've got hit records and these hit movies, and so it was just, and everybody he met wanted to party with him. So I mean, he even had he had bodyguards to keep people away from giving him drugs, which never worked. But he was not in the best shape at that point.
And when you were doing Animal House with him, it's funny because for a guy with a drug problem, he was like, wasn't it like half the week he'd fly to New York to do Saturday Night Live and then fly back and do Animal House?
Exactly. But he was clean. I don't know what they did in New York, but at least when he was with us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Wednesday night they'd drive him to Portland and put him on a plane, red-eye to New York. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he'd be there in New York doing rehearsals. And Saturday Night Live, they'd perform it Saturday night, late live. And then they'd pour him on a plane on Sunday morning, and he'd fly back to Eugene. And usually it was me and Bruce McGill, who played D-Day. We'd pick him up and bring him back to his house where Judy was waiting. And, we'd have a nice, quiet dinner and then go to work on Monday. And he was on his best behavior, and you didn't see any of that, any of that druggy behavior, thank God. And that's why he's so good, and that's why you loved him. His character, he has that. He was so cuddly, he had a big heart, and it came across in whatever he did, and I think that's one of the things that made him so funny and so dear. And by the time we got around to 1941, and then afterwards, he wasn't so cuddly.
Sounds like it was a troubled set, 1941, for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, it just went on and on and on. I mean, and there was all this, amazing talent, and and I'm not in most of the scenes that everybody else was in, so I'm off doing my ththing alone with Nancy. Right. And I think there were certain couple of scenes that I was in while they were in the main street with everybody else. So, but you'd sit around for 3 weeks waiting to shoot one little scene.
Yeah.
And because that's how Steven worked then, and he liked everybody there, and we may get to it, we may not. And that was just the way it did it, but it was a huge, huge movie.
There are individual moments in there. We've recommended the movie on this show. Stack has some great moments. The Christopher Lee, Slim Pickens, Toshiro Mifune stuff is just off the wall. Ned Beatty's very funny, but I think Gilbert would agree. It's like most all-star comedies. It's hard to pull them off for some reason. They get outsized, or
it's just like Mad World.
Too big.
It's like I advise everyone to see it, but it's not that good.
Yeah. No, you're right, and it's. I think when you look at Animal House, everybody has their own unique style of comedy.
Yeah.
Belushi's physical and not much dialogue, and I'm sort of this, guy that's trying to get laid, and Boone and Katie are a romantic, Marx Brothers kind of thing, and Pinto and Flounder are like Laurel and Hardy. You know what I mean? So everybody's got their own little distinct voice. Well, in 1941, everybody had the same voice, and it was just, it was just crazy.
Pitched manic. Yeah, there's also lacking heart that Animal House has.
Yeah.
There's an emotional center in Animal House.
I agree.
Tell us quickly about working with Tim Conway and Don Knotts.
Well,
and Jack Elam. Kenneth Mars is in that movie. Another genius.
Oh my God, yeah. Don Knotts was the sweetest, shyest, quietest guy. He was really like Gilbert. I don't know if you've ever seen the things that he did on the Steve Allen show. I'm older than you, but they would do the Man on the Street, and he was like the nervous guy, and he was he was always he was very nervous, and that was sort of Don. He was kind of just sweet, and he didn't know why he was a star. I mean, he kind of did, but and Tim Conway was merciless he would break him up, and he would try and break him up in every scene they did, and often he'd get to the point where he would just look at him, and Don would just go, So it was hard to get through a take without Don, falling to pieces and saying, "Stop that! Just stop that!" But Tim Conway, God, he was
both brilliant.
Yeah,
both comedy icons, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember much about that movie except it was a Western. We shot it up in Northern California, and there was a train involved, and then we shot in Utah a part of the time too. So that was fun. It was my only Disney film, really. I think it was the only time I ever really worked at Disney.
Interesting.
And but those guys were it was a joy to be on the set with them. They were just too funny.
Here's a couple of quick wild cards, Tim, as we wind down. Did you audition for Indiana Jones?
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, everybody in Hollywood auditioned for that. And I remember I was doing a play or going into a play, and it was a question whether I'm going to do the play here at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles, or I was going to do Indiana Jones. Of course you want to do Indiana Jones. And I just knew I looked too young for that part. I barely was shaving. I'm late 20s, but I have a very light beard. And I knew that, so I just did what I could. I added lines to my face and just and I remember I did a good test. I did a pretty good test. And I remember finally, like 3 or 4 days later, the agent said, "You know what? They loved you, but they're not, they're going to go another way." I said, "All right." They said, "But George Lucas wants you to come in, and he wants to talk to you." And I said, "Really? Okay." So on my way to the rehearsal, I'm going to do the play now. I go in and see George Lucas, and I'm kind of heartbroken. I knew this is a big movie. I knew it was going to be big. And I wanted to work with Steven again, too. And George Lucas said, "Yeah, well, he's so shy, and, said, well, it was it's a tough choice, and we're going to go, and we're really sorry." And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "But you did the best test. Yours was the best test." Oh. And I know he's probably bullshitting me, but I thought, "Oh, well, thanks." It's like the girl breaking up with you and said, "Yeah, you're a great lay." But so long, sucker. I'm sucking his dick. And it was like, and I looked at George Lucas and I said, "Oh, George, don't worry about it. We'll work together again." And it was like, Jesus, I'm consoling him for this.
That's hilarious.
Oh, jeez.
And I want to say too, you play a good bad guy. Fletch, I just rewatched the Brady Bunch sequel. You play a fun, what's the word?
Asshole?
Huh? Yeah.
Asshole. Thank you.
You do, and that's got to be hard to do. It's got to be hard to play that character and still be likable.
I just play myself, and one of the best that, thank you very much. Always the best roles are the villains. Yeah. And I did a character named Dead Larry on Burn Notice, which was actually one of my favorite.
Oh, we got to dig that up.
Yeah, it's fun. Really, really fun. He's like the biggest jerk, but you loved him, but he cut your throat, the second you weren't looking.
You do have there's that little Indiana Jones opening in the Brady sequel where you're
right. My one chance.
Yeah, you got a little bit close to it. I just want to go back quick, Tim, before we let you get out of here, because I got to bring these names up, and we didn't talk really about Space Ghost or the late great Gary Owens.
Gary Owens, yeah.
But also Ted Cassidy, Key Luke, who you mentioned, Paul Frees. These people are iconic.
Key Luke, I think I worked with Key Luke on the Hardy Boys.
Okay.
Which was something I did, a pilot that didn't sell when I was like 18, because I know part of the reason that I got the job was for all the people who auditioned, you had to have a deferment, because this was during the Vietnam War. And so if no matter how good you were, if you didn't have a good deferment, then they couldn't hire you, because you'd be drafted and be gone. And I had a deferment, so they let me test and I got the job. But that's where I worked with Key Luke and
all those guys.
And what was your deferment?
I had a 2S, which was a student deferment, and then I lost my deferment and went into the Marine Corps Reserves and did 6 months active duty, and then came back to my reserve unit in Los Angeles. So I was in the Marine Corps, but never saw active duty, never went to Vietnam.
Wow, interesting.
Thank God, otherwise I'd have been dead.
You want to tell us about somebody you both knew before we jump? Sam Kinison?
Yeah, Sam. He was great. I mean, my experience with him was, we did this pilot, and he was legendary drug issue and drug problems, and one of the funniest people I ever met.
Charlie Hoover.
Yeah, Charlie Hoover for Fox. And but he was clean and sober and straight arrow through the whole pilot. He played my demonic, evil sort of voice in my ear, to try and I was a milk toasty guy that, he was trying to get me to break loose. And he'd say, yeah, get out there and do it. So, and we came in after we shot the pilot, and I think it got picked up, and we were going to do the series, and we came in to record a bunch of lines, loop some lines, re-record sounds. And I said to Sam, God, God love you. How did you get off drugs? And what's your deal? He said, I'm not sober. Fuck it. He said, have you ever had one of these? And he pulled out some big pill. And I thought, oh, holy shit, we're in for it now. And he was great to work with, and again, a troubled man, but I mean, what a brilliant comedian, and
he was,
a brilliant stylist. I mean, Gil, you knew him. I mean, you guys performed together.
How well did you know Kinison?
What I remember about my best memory about him was I went on the Emmys as a presenter, and I got in trouble for doing these jokes about Pee Wee Herman masturbating in a theater.
George Schlatter still mad at you.
Yeah, and they cut it out, and there were all this outrage. And I remember Kinison was cracking up, and he said he loved it because everybody was worried that he was going to do something bad.
He took him off the hook.
When I got in trouble, he thought that was the greatest thing in the world.
You watched a couple of guys, young talents burn out, and John Belushi and Sam, and also Chris Farley. You did Black Sheep.
And all these guys, they were so vulnerable, and they had such big hearts. And Farley too. I mean, I think he had a death wish. I think he sort of he revered John Belushi and revered Animal House and wanted always to hear about it. And he couldn't have been more generous and nice to me and fun to, and he was one of those performers. Chris Farley was between takes while they were setting up a scene or lighting a scene. He'd entertain the background artists. There were 250 background artists, extras there as a crowd for a campaign rally. He would do a striptease to get them all, laughing and just relaxed. I mean, he just couldn't not perform. So, and he was sober while we were doing the movie, but smoked more and drank more coffee than any 10 people I've ever seen in my life. And I thought, wow, if this is how compulsive he is about smoking and coffee, I would hate to see him when he's, off the wagon.
Yeah.
And what was the cast of Bonanza like?
There's a one out of left field.
Speaking of druggies, come on.
How tight were you with Hop Singh?
We always talk about on this show, we bounce from someone being born to how would you like to be remembered to the middle of your career. And I just saw, I wrote down, but how was the cast of Bonanza?
There was the 14th year, and Lauren, and you'd have to drag these people onto the set because they'd done this show so long, and really Michael Landon was running the show, and they loved it. He ran the show very well. He wrote a lot of the episodes, and Lauren was there. They were all getting paid a lot of money to do this, and I got into trouble because I had I'd never really done a lot of press, and so. But when I got cast in it, TV Guide did a whole episode, a whole issue about Bonanza, and I was quoted as saying, I think the time for these kinds of shows has come to an end, and that it's time for a new kind of Western. And Michael Landon took tremendous exception that I said that. And almost never forgave me. He was always nice to me, but I don't think he was ever really pleased that I'd said. He called me and read me the riot act, and I apologized and said, he said people have died. People spent their life on this show. They've died on this show, and it's like, and you're dissing them. And I said, no, Michael, I didn't. I got quoted out of context and whatever, and he said, all right, but I don't think he really ever forgave me.
Wow.
It was his family, and those were the same crews that went with him to the Little House on the Prairie and then Highway to Heaven, and those were the same, the same group of people, the same crew, and that followed him everywhere. And he was a very talented, very funny man.
Nice that he was so loyal. So we'll sign off. We just want to ask you about your directing all the time now.
Yeah, I've been very busy, and. Actually, this last couple of months, I've been so busy acting, I haven't had a chance to do much directing. So I'm just going with the flow, and I love this business. I love, I'm never more comfortable than when I'm on a set, and so I just, if the door opens, I go through it.
You're working with Christine Baranski on The Good Fight. You're doing movies. You're doing all kinds of stuff. You're constantly working.
You can't get rid of him, what the heck?
And do you have anything to plug?
Well, The Good Fight is a CBS.com show that I've been recurring on with Christine Baranski, and it's a sequel to The Good Wife. And what else? I was in Madam Secretary, and I just, it's now the new shows have just been picked up, and so it's all going to start over again. So this has been great fun. You guys are awesome.
We thank you for doing this. We wanted you on this show, and we really appreciate you making the schlep and being part of this oral history project. We've done over 200 of them.
Wow. Good for you. This is fabulous. Really fabulous.
Okay, so this has been Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host, Frank Santopadre, and we've been talking to the man who took over National Lampoon and failed miserably.
He ran it right into the ground.
Sad but true.
Tim, this is the first guest. You're the first guest where my wife wanted to actually come to the recording.
Oh,
so I like to flatter you a little bit. Thanks for being so great at Chiller too.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Frank and Gil. It's great being here, and thank you. Great to talk.
Thank you, Tim Matheson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.